back with the healthcare. We can ask about that, maybe. It's kind of an important discussion.
Well, I did say when they sent it to me, I said I could go to that date, so I wouldn't vote on that because I confirmed I could do that date, so.
When was this said?
Well, it was a doodle poll that was sent to supervisors,
Oh.
and then they sent the announcement of what day was selected, and I sent it out to you.
Today?
No, I sent it out last week.
Oh,
On Friday. Yeah.
Well, actually Friday morning, but
that is very short. notice.
That's a week. For something that's pretty.
Yes, no,
Yeah,
no.
and there was all that discussion about changing the way it was. Built and stuff.
okay. Are we good to go?
Yes.
Excellent. Then I will call to order this regular meeting of the Ulysses Town Board. It is August 23rd, 2022 at 7:01 PM. I'd like to welcome members of the public both in person and who are joining us online. Carissa, would you mind doing a roll call, please?
Mr. Boggs,
Present?
Ms. Marino,
Present.
Ms. Olson,
Present.
Mr. Goldman,
Here.
Ms. Bouchard.
Present.
Moving on to the approval of the meeting agenda. One item, when I posted my agenda, I didn't have the minutes, but Chris was able to provide them after the agenda came out. So I had removed approving the previous minutes. If you would like to add that to the agenda, we could. You had a chance to review them.
Yes.
Okay, so then I would suggest that we do that new item 10. Everything else moves down. Are there any other additions or changes to the agenda as presented with that correction? Or addition, I should say. Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. The first item on our agenda is to hold a public hearing on the local law to increase compensation for the highway superintendent for 2022. I did print out a copy for every board member. It's been posted on the website, the resolution. This is the resolution. We're not going to take action in the public hearing, but I did print a copy for everybody here. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone in the public, either in person or online, who wishes to speak about the proposed local law to increase the compensation of the highway superintendent for 2022? This for the public's knowledge, this relates to an increase for the balance of the year of $3,500 for new duties related to water supervision for Water District 3. There. Anyone who, Jason, you didn't show just in case Jason Carl, no deep thought about this, okay. I'm not seeing anyone online indicating that they're interested. I will give it another little bit. Make sure everybody had a chance who was interested. Did we receive any written comments?
We did not.
Did not, okay. Well, then, hearing no comments, I would to close said public hearing.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then we are moving on to a presentation by the Inniskilling. Please join us.
Where should we go up by the?
I think, right, we can see, can we see? I can't, whether or not you're gonna be actually seen in there.
Their heads might get cut off. Yeah.
If you want to join us at the table, if you prefer to sit down, or everybody else can see, you can stand up. They'll be able to hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. There we go. Great.
So a quick procedural question. Did you guys know the planning board involved with this or?
Because it's an application for development district to come right to the town board.
And there's been no official development district
Right.
application that's been submitted.
Right.
They requested time to present to the town board.
Mhm.
And we listened to presentations on many subjects. And so I invited them to present at this meeting.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to read a letter I prepared that I'll forward you later. Dear Caitlin and other board members, the Inn at Teganic Falls is respectfully seeking the board's support in securing a development district to expand the hotel property currently located at 2030, 2031, 2051 Gorge Road in Trumansburg. Over the last 7 years, we have transformed the property with the creation of the Enchantment Wedding Garden and substantial investment in aging infrastructure and aesthetic improvements in all 24 hotel rooms and common spaces. In 2015, the previous owner engaged 28 employees at an annual cost of $300,000 in labor fees. Today, the Inn at Teganic Falls employs 125 full and part-time employees and spends $1.75 million in labor. The hotel, restaurant, and event center have all achieved excellence in posted 5-star reviews. This year, our sales team was forced to secure 3,978 hotel rooms for our clients at downtown competition, such as the Marriott, Hilton, Canopy, and Ithaca Hotel. This is a documented number. However, we feel the actual number may be greater by almost 30%. This is simply due to front desk managers constantly turning inquiries down that come in through the telephone when people are looking for a place to stay. Next year, we expect the number to double. This is a significant amount of lost revenue due to our inability to provide additional rooms to our clients. Currently, the 12-acre campus has 5 structures: Parkview, the Victorian Inn, Hillside, Lakeview, and Edgewood, totaling 24 guest rooms. All but one of these buildings were originally houses, never intended or designed to operate as a hotel. It is our desire to demolish the Lakeview house built in the 1950s and replace it with a 3-story multi-purpose hotel with a lodge-like aesthetic. It is our intention to reduce the amount of wear and tear on our 150-year-old Victorian mansion and design a new center for the campus to relieve the inadequacies currently plaguing this business with a lack of amenities and space restrictions in the existing buildings. Below is a brief outline of our objectives. This building would have subterranean parking, which would be drive-through and hopefully as many as 75 spots for cars. Would have a high ceiling height to accept all the delivery trucks that we encounter on a weekly basis. And we would install a new laundry on this level. The first floor would have in front a semicircle driveway that could accommodate 10 parked cars with a 15-minute limit for guests checking in, mainly because there's so many different places people stay. We would have a real guest check-in lobby area with an attached office for the hotel general manager and possibly a small adjoining bedroom. A concierge tourist consulting desk area with adjoining storage room and a place to hold our hotel guest luggage. 5 corporate offices and a conference room, a retail store, a spa, a fitness center with locker room. Most importantly, a great room with a cathedral ceiling and 2 stone fireplaces. One of the biggest issues we face on campus is there's no place for our hotel guests to congregate in the event of inclement weather. Currently, our existing bar has 4 seats at the bar itself. We would also include a bar in the great room that could potentially evolve into a grill. The 2nd floor and 3rd floor, it is our intention to build 35 mini suites per floor with gas fireplaces and lake views. Each floor would have its own housekeeping closet. It is our intention to design and build a world-class structure suited for the property and the surrounding aesthetic. Prior to finalizing a design, we would appreciate this board's support in understanding the value of this expansion and eliminating the maximum square footage limits and height restrictions currently listed on the books. I thank you for your time. Carl Mazzacone. I'm going to turn it over to Jason, if that's okay, who's the architect.
Okay, so I've prepared just some graphics to help walk you through and introduce the project. Everything is still up in the air, obviously, because we don't know what our path forward looks like. So I'll just try to walk you quickly through it. First page is just an aerial photo. This is south of Gorge Road. The inn and the wedding garden enchantment is across the street. You can just see Gorge Road at the top of the sheet. Lakeview is the house on the rightmost portion of the photo, and that's the best development opportunity, although there are others. The next page is just kind of a graphic breakdown of the zoning law as it currently stands. And hopefully, when we get through this, and it might take a little bit more time after this meeting to digest it fully, but hopefully I can explain. So the first graphic on the left shows a lot, you know, the green outer boundary, the blue represents building, the gray represents impervious surface. In other words, parking area. It's more of a square footage analysis, not really a site plan. But that right there shows what you're allowed to do per zoning. You're allowed to cover 70% of the lot, buildings and impervious surface. Buildings are limited to 32 feet in height. And that's above average grade plane, and there are no exceptions. Cupolas, other architectural features are not allowed. And we find that very restricting. There's also a limitation that the occupiable floor area of every building on the parcel cannot exceed 20,000 square feet. So each of the blue footprints that you see is a 10,000 square foot footprint with a 2-story limitation to create an architectural roof line that fits the rural character of the inn and the property and the you know, farm character of the town. That's really what we see as two-story buildings. So that's what zoning is. Obviously, there's other limitations to development that would restrict that. The middle diagram here is saying if we didn't change the height limit, but we could build larger buildings and we could shrink it down. This is you know, more typical of what might be built. But what we're really asking for is the diagram on the right. And so there's three things really in zoning. There's the lot coverage by buildings, which we're not going to bump up again. So we would be open in a development district to lowering that percentage. The building height we find restrictive architecturally. And this diagram here, the larger building on the right is on top of the parking, and that's what we would like to do is consolidate and minimize the impervious surface. And as you can see, there's more green space. So if we could build taller, we can cover less of the site, and we can also cover parking areas as well to minimize our impact on the site. So a change in the height regulation would allow us to do that. And then the other regulation, that building right there would be more like a 60,000 square foot building, not the 20,000 maximum. So what happens in the middle diagram is you have to spread that square footage out. So basically the middle diagram is spreading the buildings out into 20,000 square foot buildings each, whereas the diagram on the right lets us consolidate. So really, this is already a business district. Most development districts often ask for a change of use. We're not looking for a change of use. We're just looking for relief on height and that maximum building area so that we can tread more lightly on the land. On the bottom lower right-hand corner, I list some of the benefits of what we're proposing. We can get the lot coverage under 50%. A change in the height restriction allows more floors, so that minimizes our overall footprint on the site. And all this reduces impervious surfaces, which equates to less stormwater runoff and overall smaller environmental impacts. One of the big things about the property, if we turn now to the images on the next page.
It's like a joke.
The one on the two on the left are typical hotels that you see in the area. And these I selected, obviously the first image, the Econo Lodge in the upper left, you could do more architecturally to it. But this is a roof line, this will comply in the town right now. But you don't see the character of that roof, and there's not a lot going on, no cupolas or architectural features. The one on the right adds a story, but it shrinks the roof line down to a lower slope. This could also be viewed as a flat roof, which really wouldn't make a lot of sense in the rural character out here. You contrast it on the right with the existing inn, and that's when architecture can really happen and you get more beautiful buildings. So we find the height restriction, because it limits a lot of this architectural character, to be onerous, and it's difficult to design around that. So now turning to the next page, the two on the left, some of you may know Mirbeau Spa up in Skaneateles. The upper left image shows when a steeper roof is added, you can add some character. They fell a little short, in my opinion. You know, there's a few dormers. The chimneys didn't go up enough. They didn't do a lot. The image right below that lower left-hand corner is the opposite side of this building. So here's a building that reads more like 3 stories on one side and 2 on the other. These buildings would not be allowed in the town because they do go over that height limit. But it's starting to get into the examples of architectural character that we'd like to bring to the property. The next 2 images on the right, the upper and the lower, this is more in character with what we would like to do. So it would be, it could be step back like both of these show, and most likely it would be. So it wouldn't be a tall imposing face, and even the top roof or top story would be tucked in under the roof line. That's a lot like the current inn, which we hope to have 2 guest rooms on the top floor of that for next year. And then the last page is just a site plan, I should say. It's not the site plan. We don't know what we can do yet. This would require the development district, but we're trying to plot out everything that would be required. You know, there's an accessory or secondary building at the top of the site, the lower kind of middle left there. That could be a spa and some additional guest suites. We might not do that. There are existing buildings on the site. We've explored things like sewage treatment. We understand how to deal with stormwater, but those things become very taxing. So this is more consistent with what we would like to do, but the zoning window, that proposed hotel footprint really needs to be 3 stories and relief from the height, would let us create architectural character that we think would suit the town a lot better, and support the goals of the town of being environmentally friendly by minimizing our overall footprint on the site. And as you can see here, keep the site more open with green space and recreational opportunities. And Carl's adamant that we get these pickleball courts on the site. And I think that's it. We can answer questions.
The board have any questions at this juncture?
Mine for now would just be procedural going forward. I mean, do we just
Yeah, what's the
accept
next
this
step?
today and wait for them to come back? Or
No,
This is-
we don't have this as an item on our board discussion, or we don't have this as an item on our agenda to discuss. The board, and I did share this with them, the board's been presented with the my count 3 different informal requests, which is what I consider this to be at this juncture for development district, or it did going into this meeting per se. And the board was not interested in development. The board has given indications to other property owners, they were not interested in opening up. Yes. We had 3 different properties who approached us for development district potential. In my time on the board, so maybe it's 24 months. But the message sent then was that we were not interested in opening up a development district in advance of the comprehensive plan. So if that has changed, we can put this as an item on a future discussion of whether or not the board is amenable to creating a development district. I would, from a procedural standpoint, from our standpoint, it would be helpful to have our planner in place
Right.
to make that happen. If the board is interested in going that, but I think it's a longer process in terms of wanting to get a lot of public feedback, of talking to the planning and BZA board. responding to a formal request and then looking at the different elements of what could constitute a draft document of development district. Nate, did I miss anything sizable in that?
No, I was just looking at the development district, procedure and your zoning code. And it's, they apply to you, you folks review it. I mean, it'll take some significant time.
But what, do we put it through the planning board and BZA, or they're just informed, they don't have any power in this? The power for a development district is all in the town board? Is that true?
I'm not familiar enough with your particular requirements for it. I can certainly look at that.
So that's what our interim, our previous and / current interim planner, John Zepko, said. I mean, the board gets to decide whether or not to create a development district. Certainly, I think we would ask for the feedback of both of those
Right.
boards.
So if they don't, if the decision is not to do a development district, then if they wanted to do this, they have to get a lot of variances from the BZA, or we have to change the zoning,
Yes,
right?
So now I'm just confused about the issue. So you said this is a business district?
Yes,
Okay, and so the problem is the height. If you just wanted to build this without it being a development district, the hotel, it's the height, you'd need a variance for the height.
we would need a height variance and a variance for the total square footage of the building. So what that would cause is we would have to build multiple buildings across the site to accommodate the
Because
loss.
of the
lost
20,000, because of the 20,000 foot rule we have.
Yeah, it's 20,000 square feet area max on all occupiable floors. So the parking garage wouldn't count, but the hotel floors would.
Okay.
and based on height limitations, you could only do 2 floors.
Yeah,
So,
and there's always been a request previously for a variance, and it was rejected, right? The height variance you asked for
Right.
last time.
I
Yeah,
wasn't.
no, yes,
Before,
yes.
so I'm just trying to get that information.
So there are 3 pathways. in this. There's the development district pathway, which we vote on. There's the variance pathway, which is probably pretty problematic. And
well,
then,
that's not for us. so-
right, but we know they've rejected the height variance the last time. And there's the pathway of changing the zoning.
Well, all of those are triggered by getting a formal requests when
Right,
they
but
submit.
are
if they
those
submit
the
a form.
three pathways you see in the other one?
Those are pretty obvious ones.
Right, okay. Want to make sure we're following it.
So-
Again, I echo what you said. I'd look for guidance from our new planner.
Yeah.
Planning board, BZA kind of thing. This isn't really, I was on the zoning update, but that doesn't make me an expert by any means. So, and then obviously we need an architect as well.
And the whole idea behind the development district is that they can be tailored to specific needs. And that has benefits and drawbacks because, we've done development districts that have not worked out, that were tailored very strictly. And then this, I think, is probably somewhat of a different situation, but there's a process. So a formal appeal comes before us and then we get to decide what direction, if the board feels comfortable beginning a conversation about a development district and what the board feels comfortable with in terms of the components of the development district. Because they can request certain features, but the board could say, well, we're not comfortable with all of this or parts of this or whatever. So. Any other questions for them?
What you're sort of, I mean, I suppose you have a hoped for timeline, but what is your timeline that you're thinking?
It would be
on
great
this
to,
all?
Carl, I don't know what you think, but
I would have loved to have done it 2 years ago.
Right, well,
It's really frustrating. Every Saturday night, there's 3 buses filled with people going down to the downtown hotels. And I'm a hotel. I sure would love to be able to keep those people on the campus. It's a complex thing. It's just, again, we're operating a hotel with great success and wonderful reviews. That really are a bunch of houses and it's just not built to, it's not an ideal scenario. It's a lot of work. So having a sort of new center hub where people can check in, where my hotel guests can congregate in case of rain or snow, having a great room that could be used for a variety of different social events and whatnot. it fixes all the problems, you know, in one fell swoop. Finally, it's done and it's a real world-class resort. You know, I'd like to change the sign that says Emmetiganic Falls Resort and Spa. That's my plan. And it won't take much to get there. We're, you know, 3/4 of the way there now. But, you know, previously, my last experience is I came in here a little naive and spent a fortune with Jason very thoroughly designing different plans for the event center. And we, you know, went down in flames every time we came in with trying to get through zoning or planning approval. So ultimately, we ended up just wiping everything clean and coming back and doing a very expensive landscape job. It's transformed the business. It's a remarkable result. I think it's spectacular. I built it seriously almost without a budget. It is what it is. I'm very proud of it. But you know, the core business is a hotel business, and I certainly would love to be in a situation where while I'm still kicking and have some energy left in me, finish what I started. And that's really what I'd like to do, is finish what I started and you know, put the bow on the project and say done, you know. So that's why we're here. It would just make our life so much easier if we knew some of the restrictions, like currently the inn is 3 stories tall. Now, we don't want to compete with the inn, but that's a beautiful building and the 3 stories work magnificently well for us. And we don't want a bunch of buildings. We just want one building that is 20,000 square feet, but is, you know, got 3 floors. So collectively, the 3 floors make it 60, but the footprint is within the parameters of what the current zoning is. So it's just a little consideration, because how many Emmetiganic Falls are there in the area? You know, or even in central New York. I mean, we're so blessed with the location that we have and setting. And so just really want to do a first-class job for the town and for the property.
Right, so I'm just trying to get a sense of the time. I mean, I think it's gonna be a reasonably lengthy timeline for looking at all this. It's a big change. I mean, in some ways, it's a big change from what is there. So I mean, we don't have our planner yet. He's coming on in September.
Late September this
Right.
month, yeah.
Now
Right.
it's late September.
September, well, we'll talk about it, September
Okay.
26th, yeah.
Anyway, and we, you know, I would support the board, you know, going forward with this without really engaging the planning board and, you know, in looking at it.
Yeah.
Talking about this and the issues they have, because they're more expert at this than we are, and we always ask them for advice, and the BZA also, just because they see somewhat different things, and so I think we should utilize both of those groups that we have
For sure.
to get our advice. So that'll take we have to figure out what the process would be if we were gonna go further forward with it, for them to look at it, or
But
I'm not
what
quite
are we
sure what that
looking for
would be, but
tonight?
that's what I want.
Is a negation if
Yeah.
we just all say no development district, period, it's over.
Well, I think they have the right to put in a request one way or the other, and the board can choose to pursue or not pursue.
So that would be the next step.
I would say that's the next step. I think it would be useful to tell you both now, is I ended up having a conversation with the village. And for your parcel, regardless of whether we change the development district or change it into a development district or not, it's my understanding, and this is worth checking on because I know it has a sizable impact, is that you'll need you'll need additional water infrastructure than what you have. And the village, if that happens, wants it to be a town water district. So that's a whole other component that I would recommend exploring sooner rather than later in terms of any development that you do that's not involving the existing lines. So
Because the existing line goes up. The line for their second source from the village's second source. of
is it
water.
currently?
It goes up to get a property.
So
Right, it goes
the
up to Canada.
the inn has water by right that the village provides. The village gets to set its rate.
Right,
Um,
but where's the pipe that connects it?
it goes up the road to the second sources. It's north into the park, west into the park.
So it's off the second source.
Uh-huh.
The pipe.
So they must have come off the park system,
They did. So,
but then the park turned it over to the village.
So the way that contract with the village, there's the contract between the village and the state. And the contract, I have not read it, so I'm paraphrasing. It's been my understanding from the village that the contract states that as part of the state granting the village the right to drill and establish their structure there. That they would provide water to the park and sell water to the park and to the Innitiganic. And so, but when I talked, but all that infrastructure was effectively in place when the village took it over. Because you had you have a buildings there. And so, but any extension to that, the village wants to move in the direction that any outside users that are added are in town water districts. They don't want to keep adding users
So
that are not.
do they bill you directly for the water?
Yeah. Basically, the missing component here is that the Innitiganic Falls was originally owned by John Jones, who owned all the park, all 800 acres. So when he sold the park to the state of New York in 1925 for $10,000, I have the original agreement, and we have water rights in perpetuity. That's why they had to provide us with
So
water.
even for these 3 houses,
Yeah, for the whole campus.
so why would that change?
But that more water, because the infrastructure that's in place isn't sufficient to support additional facilities. So the
Right.
construction of those facilities would be through a water district. So that's what the village is telling me. So I'm not getting in the middle of your
Yeah.
negotiations with the village,
No,
but I wanted to
it's
be on
none
your
of this
radar
scares
screen. I just wanted to be on your radar screen.
Tank for water pressure for sprinklers. I know I'm gonna have to build some type of a package plant for all my sewer treatment. I look forward to that. I would like to regain use of my leach fields and build green areas that are flat for parking. So we know it's a big deal. We're prepared for all that.
This information I was learned late last week, and so I wanted to make sure that I knew you probably hadn't spent additional significant money in between that and the last time we talked. So just wanted to share that with you.
Appreciate that.
Well, I could speak to the timeline well, first, this round circle, the gray circle in the corner is a water tank. Because I know something's coming.
Oh, yeah.
But in terms of timeline, in a perfect world, we'd be breaking ground in May or June. And hopefully it could be built in a year. That's unrealistic, really.
Not if they say yes.
Right.
It's still aggressive with water districts and all of that. But what happens is we're on the summer season, May to October for the wedding. So the sooner we can break ground. So let's say it's August, could we, that would ensure we're open for the following season. But if it starts pushing, so there's a little bit of time pressure. Obviously to Carl's best interest, and if we could get this through in the next 6 months and get in the ground in spring, then there's an outside chance we can get it done.
I think 6 months is a reasonable time to figure this out, whether it's a go or not. And that's,
So you're just looking for a straw poll from us tonight that says, yeah, we're open to it.
Well, I mean, they can submit, and I would encourage them to submit a formal request and give us some time to think about it. And because we didn't put this on an agenda for discussion. So they have the right to, in my mind, they have the right to request it, and we have the right then to put it on it. We'll put it on agenda and
Yeah.
we can
So I'm open.
discuss.
Right, I think we need to come up with a process
Well,
for
yeah,
how we would work it through if we did look at it.
Right, and that's why we have an attorney
And
and
so we
a
need a
planner.
discussion of that.
Mhm.
Sure.
The process that John Zepko shared was come here with a formal application, goes to planning board for commentary, and then goes back to the board here for the vote.
And
So
we can have
but
other-
you can do whatever
Yeah.
Right.
in addition, obviously.
Yeah.
If I may, I just wanted to say one more thing.
Mhm.
We do view this as a symbiotic relationship. We know the comp plan is going to be looked at again. One of the things that the current comp plan is promotion of ecotourism, which we think this fits the bill, bringing people from all over to the state park, and that's what everyone does when they come to the end. They walk the trails. We created paths down to the park. So that's one large component. Carl touched on a couple other things. The job creation is huge. He's really transformed what was there with a number of full-time employees, and the tax revenue has increased. And then obviously it's we're sending more to the city right now, so it'd be great to bring that back and, promote the town. So I just thought I'd throw those couple things out there. And then one final comment, since it is a business district, in my mind, I view this as development district light, because it's just those couple little tweaks in a very secluded parcel. It's surrounded by parkland, and it's on a slope and trees everywhere. So we're seeking, Carl and I are very passionate about the architecture, and we couldn't even get the cupolas approved for the height restriction last time. Yeah, we were basically, the ridge line was at the height limit, and the cupolas were denied. So it was just very frustrating. And as a designer, as you move forward, without knowing where you're going, you can spin your wheels and spend a lot of time going in the wrong direction, only to hit that roadblock later. And that happened to us twice. So we ended up with a great project, but no buildings, and very difficult to finance. So trying to make it a little bit easier, know what the ground rules are before we go forward. So a straw poll of at least some willingness to consider a formal application is what we're hoping to see tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd be willing.
Yeah,
Great. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time tonight. And my sympathies to your 9 o'clock meeting.
Thank you all. Wonderful.
That is true. Yeah, that's an ambitious 9 o'clock.
thank you.
Okay, moving on to privilege of the floor. Is there anyone in person or online who wishes to address us?
I'd be interested if I could. It's Bob Howard.
Yep, go ahead.
I've just been listening in, and I must say that some of what was just said is a mischaracterization of how the BZA handled those appeals. So I would urge you, before you simply take the word of any applicant you get, that you check with your BZA members and look a little bit more into the history of what's happened. I personally was offended by what I just heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public who wishes to address us? We'll have a second privilege of the floor at the end of the meeting as well. Okay, moving on. The first item is local law to increase compensation of the highway superintendent for 2022. When I sent out my packet is right before your associate or paralegal, I'm not actually sure which, sent out the resolution that Nate's office put together for us. So I provided the board with a physical copy. This is a resolution approving local law number 3-2022. This would increase the highway superintendent's compensation by $3,500. We already did that, but this is the law approving the resolution. So is there any, I will move this. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this?
A couple of questions.
Sure.
So I'm admittedly struggling with it. So he already has supervisory authority over the water people?
No, he had supervisory authority over highway. There was a shared position, and the town supervisor's office was supposed to be supervising water. In practicality, that doesn't work for any number of reasons, particularly because the previous water operator was working the majority of his time for the highway superintendent.
Well, so in the annual meeting, says water district and maintenance operator, and it says the supervisor is the highway superintendent.
And I can tell you that Scott had not seen his responsibilities as monitoring water, and that it was the town supervisor's responsibility to handle water.
Okay, well, so we had given him that. The other part is I feel like for this, a couple of things. There's the structure of it. So he is one of the three most important people in town. There's, you have the supervisor, the clerk, and the highway superintendent. And so I don't feel like the highway superintendent, I personally don't want to see him out reading water meters. I feel like I need him speaking, I'm gonna personalize it. We've got all these people that drive the roads, and if he is really the face of the town when you see the highway workers and stuff out there, right? So I wouldn't want to see him, he read the meters just a week or so ago. And I think he should be delegating that to one of the people in his department. So as we had used Lansing as one of the models, I think in the proposal there. And I think he should work on getting the other 4 people, so there's some diversity in there. Send them to the school and get them, get their grade D licenses is one thing I'd like to see. I know you want to roll off some responsibilities. I get that.
Well, it's not
Yeah.
really rolling off responsibilities. It's just, it makes sense that I'm not the person you should call if there's a water main break. Like, I can't operate any of the heavy machinery. I can call somebody else, but I could go out there and be like, yep, it looks like everybody's digging really well. And
You're an administrator.
Right.
So, I mean, you can't know everything. That's why you have a whole team, below you and say, this fits best under Michael's area, right? And you're gonna dispatch me to go do whatever it is you want me to do. You've got that whole team under you. And so that's more like what I would want to see Scott doing, right?
right, and I guess I would back up and say, so we appointed him, first off, now in the organizational minutes, the person that he's supervising, that we delegated supervision to, no longer exists as a position currently in the town.
But we
So-
don't have any-
Right, so we're not appointing him as water operator, we're appointing him as water supervisor. And the idea is that when we had a change in when the code office changed, when we had a change in personnel, it worked very well to have somebody else come in effectively and say what's working and what's not, because it's not apparent, it's not transparent to anybody at this table, even when in my office. When I'm, with current staffing, I'm sure there are things I don't know are happening, right? That's always the case. And it was really helpful in code for someone with fresh eyes to come in and say, what do we actually need? Because of what we have been told we need and what we might actually need are not necessarily the same thing. And that's kind of what we're already discovering. And so the idea is not that Scott will be reading meters in perpetuity. We very much are supportive of, I'm very much in support of getting a water operator who's going to handle those details. But the question becomes within a staffing component, is there somebody on staff who can effectively serve as our water operator, opening up space and time for us to hire a full-time highway superintendent? Or not highway superintendent, I'm sorry, hold it, a full-time highway worker, laborer? Or do we go out and find an incredibly part-time water operator? The likelihood of finding an incredibly part-time water operator might not even be possible. We think it's internally, we've had discussions that it's probably far more likely for us to go out and hire a full-time laborer in the highway department, and for someone currently on staff to become the water operator after they get their certification. I personally would like to see anybody who's willing in highway to get their certification, so we have redundancy. Scott is not hoping to read meters, but he wants to know how to do it so that when he's supervising somebody, he actually knows how it works. So that's kind of where we are. I'm not disagreeing with anything you said. I think everything you said has great value.
Right, I just want to make sure as we go forward, there is kind of that structure there, because I know, we wanted to change it a little bit, and it does need to change, right? I agree with it. It does need to change. But I'd like to see, some diversity in there, and that perhaps all 4 of them, or unless somebody doesn't want to, they get their certification for that. And then there are ways to carve things off of it that, we've discussed in previous water meetings,
Absolutely.
that we can really spread the wealth of the thing.
Absolutely. I think it's much better for the water district to have more people who know what they're doing. So for vacations and all those sorts of purposes, a staff turnover happens. And so when Scott and I have discussed this in particular, we're seeing this kind of as a bridge to 2023. The idea is we're looking at building into the 2023 budget a full-time highway laborer, which frankly will save the town money to be paying at that rate versus changing existing staffing because we're under a union contract. We can bring somebody in new, hopefully somebody who wants to put in 20+ years to the town. And we could train them in water operations also, but we do have existing staff who have indicated a willingness to assume some of the responsibilities, if not all of the responsibilities. But part of it is, Scott just trying to get a real grasp on the day-to-day work that's involved, because what I don't want to do is prematurely say, okay, we're going to go hire somebody for 20 hours when the job takes 14 or takes something else, right? And so we're trying to get some really good numbers as fast as possible so we can go into a 2023 budget season with here's what realistically it takes to do the district. So no
So that's
disagreement
not
with what you're saying.
So this local law is just, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the other thing was, as Richard brought up last time about making sure this isn't, a ratchet and locks them in. Because it's when you annualize it, it's a substantial raise. It's like a 12% raise. Which is a lot of money,
Mhm.
In one jump. And so as we're just gonna discuss later with the planner and stuff, I think we should, do a salary.
We agree, right? This is just for this year. It's an
This is just for this year.
And it's not, and Nate, we talked about this last time. Are we 100% sure that this doesn't go on his base salary?
Correct, it is just for this year. So when you're setting the budget for next year, of course, part of that discussion is always, what are you paying people?
Right, so we can't reduce his salary.
Yes,
This 3,500 isn't part of that conversation.
correct.
So I will be proposing that he is appointed as water superintendent for next year. So I don't want that to come as a surprise. But the question is, how many hours of management does he really need if he has staff doing most of the work? And who's going to bear the cost of it? We really should be compensating him for management of Water District 3 staff. But realistically, I'm looking ahead. We are, the village would very much like to, we're opening some cans of worms related to water districts that are in fact not water districts, yet we call them water districts. The only formal water district we have is Water District 3. The other 3 are not formal water districts. We call them that. But there could be a real problem down the road as the infrastructure in those systems ages out, and we don't have mechanisms for those property owners to be saving up and bonding out and investing in having a continuity of water. And these are property owners who have water. This is not building new water districts. These are people who are existing water users. And so Scott, I would very much like Scott to be part of that conversation, because what I would hate to see happen is with somebody whose property has had water since the 1950s, and we have town properties who've had water since the 1950s, have a water collapse because whatever pipes are there are no longer sufficient and they haven't been keeping their wells active, and all of a sudden they don't have water. And the village I've talked to the village isn't coming to save their day. And the village has made it very clear that if there's a collapse of systems outside the village, that's not their responsibility.
But all those districts are getting water from the village.
They're
Not the town.
purchasing water.
Right, but their source is not the same as Water District 3.
Correct.
It's the village, so it's tied in with the village's water.
Right.
But what
supply,
she's saying is the
water.
village isn't gonna be responsible.
But because of the pipes,
For
that's the
maintenance.
problem, like nobody, who
But for
owns the
maintenance.
pipes,
Yeah,
who's
that's
gonna
a separate
maintain the pipe,
discussion.
it's a long separate.
Yes.
Right, it's a long
Right,
separate
right.
discussion that I really want Scott to be a part of, because someone's
So-
because we're gonna need to
I
spend.
wanna be careful with, because
Now,
the way the math was done on it, it's like he's gonna work an extra 5 hours. Like he's gonna go from 40 to 45 hours. And usually you give somebody like, I'm gonna give you an extra $1 an hour or something like that. And this, the 12% is really substantial, because essentially what he's gonna do is less highway work and some water work, right?
Well, he has to do all the things that he already does. And he also has to take responsibility for this. I personally don't think $3,500 for the balance of this year to figure things out while the water operator, we're not paying a water operator. We're not gonna be overspending our budget line
Yeah.
as it is. So this is still, I think, a financially prudent strategy. I don't think that long-term, it's going to need to be 5 hours, but I can see it being 1 hour for the water district and maybe 30 minutes a week. Because it's not gonna be every 30 minutes a week, but I want him to be involved in conversations
Mhm.
related to how are we
Yeah, that
gonna
makes
fix
all
these other
sense.
water districts?
So I just want to
Yeah,
make sure.
no.
So last thing, I don't want to, beat this to death, but, if he feels like we're taking money away from him next January, right? We're gonna say, okay, or is this locked in? We're gonna say, he's the water superintendent. We owe him $8,400 for the year to be the water superintendent, right? Or,
Right.
if it's reduced to say, $1,000 a year or 50 cents an hour, whatever it comes out to be. Anytime you take money from people, and so,
So I personally.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's.
No, I personally negotiated with this with Scott and I said, we need to figure out, we're using this as a holding pattern to get us to effectively not limp us through because we're not limping, but to help us bridge the gap to 2023 and find the appropriate staffing mechanism to staff the town. And then, this number's not set in stone in terms of how many hours it is, but this is based on I'm planning to, be majority responsible for the water district to the end of the year because the certification period is in October, I believe this year is when they're offering the class for, please don't hold me to that. I could be wrong, but I think it's in early October. For the civil service for the planners in early October. I know that one's the case. It's late September, early October for certification. And so the idea is ideally we're going to be able to transition somebody currently on staff into serving as water operator, freeing us up to go hire somebody for highway, freeing up Scott, who I really would like to have more time to do administration in the town because Scott has been very much a working superintendent who is very much out on the roads. I went snow plowing with Dave and, Scott was there the whole time. He was filling, he's filling salt. He's working the same hours that his guys are during a snowstorm. So, but the challenge is, and I think Chris will at least nod and back me up on this. It's hard to carve out time with him to do a lot of the administration things that we need him as highway superintendent to have time to do. So ideally, like I said, I'm hoping that we can ultimately hire a labor position, build in the water operator position within somebody there and reduce Scott's amount of time necessary to be doing water per se. But this is just kind of a bridge instead of having to go out and hire a consultant or, a person on an interim basis to do water because they don't seem to be out there right now. This is the tough hiring market. So that's the plan. I'm not trying to commit the board to anything after the end of December.
All right,
On
let's vote.
financials. Okay, so I will move, so I'm sorry, we already did the motion of the second.
Questions?
Is there any-
No, I just wanted to say that's all a longer discussion and we should just deal with this.
Oh, but the other district, yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, would you do a roll call? I vote they want us to do a roll call vote on this for local, I'm sorry.
Sure. Ms. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Bronx.
Aye.
Ms. Bouchard,
Aye.
Mr. Goldman,
Aye.
Ms. Marino.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Can I, we did it last time. Why was that a law? Just trying to refresh my memory.
So the compensation of elected official like this.
Okay.
increasing
Because
it
it's
down
over
the
the
calendar
budget.
year, it is subject to permitted.
Right.
So that notice needs to get published. Do you need us to send you notice?
I don't think so. I'll let you know. I think I have.
okay, excellent. So moving on to our discussion on the special events ordinance. For the board present, I printed out Roxanne and Michael's most recent draft. I didn't print out the additional.
I have it on my computer. Your input will be needed, so you might as well read it. And well, there's places that say the wording has to be cleaner and more.
So would you like to introduce?
Right, so I sent this, so a while ago's discussion of the special events permit, Michael and I brought some of the things that we've learned and in doing our research and thinking about this, and I had a really helpful conversation with Nate and also one with mark. And so I brought that information to the board, and then the board suggested that the next thing to do would be to try to actually write what one might change into the law in a new draft that you could read. And so that is what I tried to do with this, which I sent last time, so everybody had it, in enough time to talk about today. And in this draft, so I incorporated some of those things, and most of the time I made a little comment note that has to do with what the thinking was there, or some piece of the rationale. And the other, or things I thought, should be discussed. And then beyond that, there was a lot of talk about altering the penalties for offenses. And so I think that is the thing that, requires board discussion. And as I put here, our subcommittee really didn't feel comfortable outlining this beyond broadly saying that, this should be part of the discussion, because there's a lot of different ways that it could be done. But I mean, one of the other key, the key things in here where I tried to change or put in, there was this discussion about the 30 days commencement of special permits issued under this law. And then, and as Nate pointed out when we were talking, perhaps even longer than that would be needed for special event applications that exceeded the limit that we're going to allow, so that they had to be reviewed by whoever we choose to review them, the town board to decide, or the planning board, or whoever, whoever BZA, whoever we're going to assign as the town board, I think is what everybody wanted. But because then it might need to go through more process, and you need meetings and things. And so that's why that at least 45 days was added there. And then, there's this question of in 142.3b, I didn't really put a little, comment note there, but that's an issue. I wrote what I thought as a suggestion after thinking this through and all, but obviously the board should discuss it. It used to say 5, I think, and then the proposal was changed to 1, and there was a lot of public comment about that. And then there was also some discussion at one of our meetings that perhaps it be scaled to the size of the event, and that if it's a really big event of X number, that it's the town board even for 1. I personally would have a concern with that, because it seems like it's particularly targeting one or thing that happens here every year and has happened here for, 20, 30 years or however long. And people will, if that's what the board wants to do, it's fine, but I think
No,
it
it's not
does.
targeting the event itself, it's targeting the ancillary camping situations that weren't there for the 30 years I've been there.
Right, but there's only one event that's ever been held in this town that is of that.
Yeah.
A large size.
Sure.
So, okay, I'm just saying that we will hear that it is targeting the grassroots organization. It's fine if the board wants to do it. I was suggesting 2 per year. And then from beyond that, the town board would approve it based on the recommendation of the planning board. We added some, wording that I didn't get really well, but we need to clean up, but about how any special events permit we need to see all the other required permits and licenses, as Nate brought up when I was talking with him. There's a lot, sometimes there are other things that are needed, liquor license, liquor permits, like there's other things. And so that the town code enforcement officer board, whoever's reviewing it, should have, all of that stuff should be in the packet for issuing a special event permit. We don't have
Right.
any
But-
recognition
but
of that in there.
In the
right now.
case of what we just went through, because the health department's involved and they don't certify till the day before,
Right.
or not at all, like we've just had.
Right,
How do you get around that? Because they've already sold permits for camping 6 months before that.
So what you can do is yours doesn't become live, even if it's approved in advance, effectively, until those approvals are in place. So you pass, say, someone has a special event and we say, sure, it's approved, conditional upon receiving the necessary approval from the health department.
So in the meantime, the owners of the event are selling camping permits without knowing whether they're gonna get an approval on the permit, which is hit or miss. One year they do, this year they didn't. So Nate, how do you deal with that? I still
Yeah, I
can't
mean,
conceptually think it through.
You know, so as the town board or a town entity reviewing it, I think the approach would be just as Caitlin described, you know, you applicant identify for us all of the permits that you say that you need to conduct your event. And then as a condition of our approval, we're gonna say within, you know, X hours of issuing from the appropriate entity, you give us copies of that, we can then monitor that and know if you're actually met the conditions of your permit. Now, for the business owner who's out there selling camping or tickets prior to getting all their approvals, you know, if I'm them, I better have a solid handle on my refund policy. In the event my event gets shut down because I, in fact, wasn't able to fulfill and meet and open. I think, you know, your point about the recent incident or the, you know, the recent issue, you know, my understanding is that there are pending investigations regarding exactly what happened and potential
Right.
things happening out there, which
Mhm.
I'm not gonna overly discuss, but, you know, my understanding is stuff's going on.
Yep.
So, you know, that will possibly address some of these things. I don't want to get.
My concern is 2,000 people are already here on the day before the health department permit is issued. It doesn't get issued. They're still there. We don't have resources to escort them off the premises.
No, so really, I mean.
That's
all
why
can-
we have fines, right?
All we can do
Yes,
is change the penalties or bar events of X size in any ever occurring, you know, I mean, there's only so much we can do if they
Right.
don't get the permit.
So there, I mean, that you could, right? So obviously you don't call your highway superintendent, say, I've got another job for you.
Yeah.
Move 2,000 people out. I mean, what you would do is you would go to court and get a court order saying, you know, they've not met their permit conditions. Therefore, judge, please issue an order enjoining and restraining them from moving forward. And then the sheriffs would likely get called in to basically enforce that. Now, that's an option.
It's
Fines-
discretionary, right?
Yeah, fines are the other option, you know, and that's where as the enforcing authority, you have to take a look at the actual situation on the ground, decide what's in the best interest of public safety in the particular moment, and take chart a path from there.
And I think to kind of ratchet it back and look at it from more of a bird's eye view. And this would be for any event, does the board perceive that it's impossible for somebody to meet the standards necessary to have the event legally? I don't see it I personally don't see that being the case to get the necessary health department approval.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
So I don't, so I don't see a health department that's unwilling to work with groups in attempting to have events in Tompkins County. So what I would say is it's they're running that risk. That's not our risk. We're setting the ability to have events. I don't want to eliminate events in the town of
No, no,
Ulysses. I don't think anybody does.
Nobody's talking about.
Right, but I think that that's their risk that they're running, not our risk that we're running, and that we have to set high, frankly, higher penalties.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So like what this says right now is, you know, they won't get, if we don't get all of the required permits, you know, everything reviewed and all of them. Finally, within whatever I put 12 hours,
Right.
you know, something what's reasonable, you know, then they're in violation of our special permit. And then the fines get kicked in
Right.
because we can't and don't enforce
Right,
the public health, the
Right.
Department of Health
Right.
stuff anyway. So all we can do is say you don't have a special permit and go to court, but the timing is such that
crazy.
that is such a big mess anyway. So I think the hope is that maybe, you know, we can have penalties that will, you know, deter
yeah,
people from not meeting things, which it seems like can be met, and maybe we can even have a conversation, you know, about, you know, what happened and can we find ways to make this work better? Why couldn't you do that?
Right.
Like, what would help, you know, beyond a law, changing the
Yeah, yeah.
law? And so that, I mean, I don't see what else we can do other than completely bar
yeah,
allowing
which we don't want, we're
Any-
not gonna do.
camping like that on any property at that scale, you know. So, So, yeah. And then, I mean, then the other discussions, I think, the board can discuss whether you want to make it such that an event of a certain size, as was brought up from the get-go, is the responsibility of the town board to issue the permit, or if you want to leave it as the CEO has some level of
Right.
responsibility, and beyond that, it's the board for any other events.
I would have a question about how would you know how many people, especially if it's a new event?
Right.
You could lowball it and then your fines would be less and your
Yeah,
application fee would be less, but sometimes people don't know how successful.
How you know in advance something might be.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's
I mean-
where it's effectively lots of, if somebody comes in and says, I'm gonna throw an event with, it's gonna fall under the 1,000-person threshold. Then the condition would be, you have a control mechanism in place to make sure that you do not exceed that 1,000 people. Whether that's tickets or wristbands, somebody at the gate actively counting it. Usually it's some mechanism like that as opposed to, sure, just let however many people, because of that exact concern.
Well, revealing my age, Max Yasker's farm expected 10,000 people and 400,000 showed up.
Well, I can tell you that for events that trigger mass gathering, the health department is physically on site monitoring attendance and
right,
that stuff.
Well, that's good.
right.
So didn't Lucas have to monitor that? Because we've got a
Well,
whole
there's a
number of.
fire.
He does a fire inspection. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's building and safety codes that are triggered whether or not there's a special event permit or not. So
Right.
there was no special event permit for anything on the fairgrounds, but both Mark and Lucas were.
Do they limit occupancy there? Because like even you should have one in here, I think, someplace. Oh, right there, maximum 60. Because of egress issues.
We're getting too far into the weeds for me to
Right.
speak with
Yeah.
any assurance. I would suspect that's the case. How that's actually monitored in practice, I don't know.
Well, so they need a mass gathering permit for the fairgrounds.
Yeah.
Right,
And they have to get that.
right.
And then they don't need one for the camping. So the mass gathering stuff
And they
doesn't
got that.
apply to the
That's
campground.
right.
Well,
It's just the DOH.
No,
Actually, no, that's actually not.
Well, when it was coupled
Right,
together, but
right.
then when the health department decided to decouple it, if they're only looking at a permit to camp, separate from the permit to have the festival, that doesn't meet the number of people requirement for mass gathering and camping. They put like 2,000 and it's 5,000. So the
Well-
health department decoupled.
Actually,
those
no,
things
the
and
health,
made it-
the health department didn't actually, the state did,
because
because,
somebody made it not.
right, because when I talked to the health department about decoupling it, I was informed in advance of the festival that they couldn't do that. That because the way they do their they were not issuing a campground permit as an independent standalone.
Right, they sold it.
They, no, I'm sorry, the health department wasn't issuing it as a standalone. What they were doing is because they were working under the auspices of a mass gathering permit. The mass gathering permit goes with the event, not the parcel. We operate by the parcel. The health department typically operates by the parcel. And so I asked about the separation of the two and they said it was all or nothing. And so it must have happened at the higher level because the state was monitoring the county's review. So the county works as the administrator for the state grant or the state permit. And so the
So
state
weird.
must have, I know, the state, it's my understanding, and please, I could be wrong, but from my understanding, the state was the one who ultimately decided to decouple the campground from the rest so they could issue the mass gathering permit for the actual festival. So,
Mike, this was never an issue when they were at Agard Road.
I can't speak to any of that, so.
Never an
No.
issue. They got their permits, they bust them over. It was perfectly fine. Well, I think fines are the way to go. I don't think we have any other way to go.
I don't think unless you just ban it. I
But
don't
we're
see
not
what
gonna,
else you could
we're
do.
not gonna do that.
Right, I'm just saying, I don't see anything else
Yeah.
you can do.
So do we want to talk about scaling the fines? Currently, it's a violation of $1,000. It's a violation is a $1,000 fine the first day and $2,000 for each day thereafter.
For violence.
No, the violation is if you don't have so here's the thing. So under the current system, if you didn't get a permit and you had the event, the violation is not having the permit, right? So not having the permit, operating without a permit is $1,000 for the first day and 5,000 or 2,000 for each day after that.
So it's only about 9,000 or 10. You're at 17.
No, it's higher than that. We can go.
Okay.
Five. How long was it? 4 days?
Yeah, 5.
Four
Nope.
days.
Um,
Thursday, Friday,
No,
Saturday.
because
I-
of culture.
there was activity
Oh.
going on.
No. The week.
Is that like 3 days or 4 days?
Yeah, it's 3 days.
But the truth is that amount of money isn't gonna be a deterrent to the size project it is. So I think we'd have to increase substantially.
So what is that? Who's got an opening bid?
Right, that's what I don't, and so then we had talked about cutoffs and I was mistaken in my first presentation of that and thought it was the Department of Health had cutoffs, because Mark had gone through this whole thing with me, but really it's I asked him, can you give me a reference to those numbers? And he said it was the fire safety code requirements for public safety, not the Department of Health ones that were those cutoffs that he gave me, which were like 0 to 499, 500 to 2,000, 2,000, 1 to 5,000, above 5,000. But I asked him, I could not find those detailed numbers in the reference he gave me, but he said, oh, they're all dispersed through it. But anyway, he said, I think though these are reasonable cutoffs, so I just.
Nate, how do we think this through? To come to a reasonable, a
Are-
deterrent.
Well, they.
Yeah, I mean, I think that any of these approaches could be reasonable, right? It just depends on exactly how you craft it and, you know, the office of the lawyer will answer, but I mean, maybe what we do, 'cause we don't necessarily, I don't know if any of you are in a position right now to say, yes, this is exactly it tonight.
Yeah.
I'll have my paralegal, Kelly, go pull a bunch of fine schedules from other places.
I think that'd be really helpful.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
And just think about it,
Yeah,
in a cutoff.
Yeah.
Way like that, because that really does connect, like a stepwise.
no, I agree. It
thing.
should be,
It
it
connects it
should
to
be
the amount
step.
of work that
Yeah,
has to occur, like as Mark was saying, it's a huge amount more
Huge
work
amount more
for,
work.
a 5,000 person or a 2,000 person gathering than a 500
Sure.
person. gathering.
oh, well, that's good. Let's do that. Thanks, Nate.
And so I don't know about any of the rest of this, if at the same time that Nate's group there is looking at this stuff, if you want better wording put into some of this that is a little cleaner, or if there's something you just really don't like at all about the other suggestions beyond because it seems like if you guys are going to look at it, then it might make sense to get better, clearer wording too. I did my best, but I sort of have italics pending attorney input there.
Yeah, so
On
it's
the
sort of
wording.
seems like permits and licenses
Right.
and what
I
else?
know,
would
because
there
I tried to
be?
capture it writing really fast.
Or other,
Yeah,
applications.
right, just that you're covering all the bases of, we didn't have that in there before, but we should have, that we should get all of those things.
In the original, maybe I'm just missing it and I can't remember. I thought in the original, a single event was up to 5 days long. Is
Right.
that being maintained as a single event now?
I think that's remains the same. No, let's see. I have the other one here. Okay. You mean the original,
The existing
the
law,
existing law?
a single event can be up to 5 days.
Right, like that's A, so that's
Remains the
A,
same.
and that's says it's either it's 50 vehicles, 8 hours overnight camping. Let's see, where's
Yeah, it's 142-3A,
yeah,
no special events. should be
Right.
within 5 days.
it's 3-3A, so that I think says it's the same now. Yeah, oh no, -3A.
I don't see 3.
Oh, I don't have that in there anymore.
I don't see a 3A.
Well, right now, we just say they won't. we
No
got it in the
operator shall.
line, But they wouldn't hold a special event.
Right.
So you're right. I think that somehow when I was trying to insert these other,
Well, it's no
in the
longer
right
than
place.
5 days.
I left that out.
Well, we would need to add it to this draft.
Right,
So,
yeah.
but I wanted to make sure the board was comfortable maintaining,
Yeah.
50 cars, 8 hours.
Right.
5 days. If this,
So, so 50 cars. I was at a wedding the other night at a farm, their first event. It was 7 hours.
Mhm.
The event. But people were there before and after, and I think there were more than 50 cars, but I don't know that they applied for a permit.
So the.
They're
current-
exempt.
Yeah,
Why?
Weddings.
Well, are
Weddings
they-
exempt?
well, but is it a business that's hosting the
Yes.
wedding? Aha, see, that would be different.
Well, no, I mean, the couple hosted the wedding.
At their own house, at
No,
their own
at
property.
the farm venue, wasn't their farm.
so
They're renting, the farm owners are renting this out now as a wedding venue. And last night, Saturday night was the first event.
Okay,
So your current code has two, under 142-2B, two things that are not considered special events. One is a non-commercial social gathering at a single family residence, including but not limited to a party, family reunion or wedding, or an event held on commercial property with available parking for the event. So even if that wedding was 12 hours long, if they have enough parking,
Yeah,
if they're a commercial property.
it's
so is
it's
it,
considered a commercial
it's
property.
a farm,
Is a farm a commercial property?
they grow hens.
Typically, events, if it's. We'd have to look at.
And see, this
Let's
is where
put it
I think,
there. We would have to really look at.
talk about
And
that, yeah.
talk to your code, use some clarification, and talk to your planner and your code enforcement officer to see how they're currently interpreting the code. To make sure that we're all being consistent, so we shouldn't, I don't wanna
Right,
Right.
start hypothesizing on what they think the code says and how they're interpreting.
right, because we allowed agricultural events.
Right.
That, so maybe, yeah, but it's not commercial, but it's an type of an event that's allowed, so maybe we should.
But that's like a
Write that in.
one-time event,
Right.
right? This could be 2 nights a week for 30 weeks. It could be 60 events.
Which is different. I mean, but then you have to look at the actual property. Is it an agricultural property?
Yes.
Does-
But
But-
if you did something, we can talk about this because it's out of our area, but it's Silver Queen Farm.
Right,
Yeah, they have a
Yeah.
wedding venue.
Right. It's a farm.
right,
It's a
Just like that.
commercial.
like that.
You know, do we have coverage for that? Is it an ag property or is it a commercial gathering?
Right, right.
And is
No,
it covered under ag and markets or
Yeah.
is it the discretion of the town? I mean, these are some great questions to answer before we change this. And I think that would be, I'm looking at you, looking at Kelly.
Question's good. I think. Make sure we catch them.
Can you
Yeah.
look into
Yeah.
that, Nate?
Yeah, and it will be talking with, so the example that you had about
Right.
that one particular property, like. As it was just asked, is it an ag district? Does it fall under ag and markets because of exactly what they're doing, and how they're classified? Because lots of farms are doing some really interesting things.
Right.
that I
Yeah.
would not have thought
Right.
were necessarily
I
farms.
think when we talked about it before and looked at them, and Mark said he's never had anything on the farm in his time that met it because it wasn't, the duration was never 8 hours or more.
Right.
And if it's not 8 hours or more and there's no camping, even if there's 50 cars, it's not a special event. Because it's two things.
So,
It's not over 8 hours, but if, I thought it was, is, and 50 or 50 car, more than. 50
No.
car.
It's must. It said it will result in the traffic generation of more than 50 vehicles and be more than 8 hours in duration and or involve overnight camping on a property, which is not an overnight facility. pursuant
Right,
to
so this
zoning.
isn't that.
So when we were looking at the agricultural things, there's rarely, hasn't been anything thus far that met that over 8 hours, or they were having camping, so.
But you said it was over 8 hours, right?
Well, no, it was 4 to 11, people, it was in the torrential thunderstorm, so people left early. I mean, it was, let's say it was 7 hours, and there were more than 50 cars. Then that doesn't.
So it wasn't a special event because they weren't having it last 8 hours.
So you could have 200 cars, at 7-hour event, no problem.
and you could do it every day.
Right.
Well, if somebody was doing it every day, then I would say, this is a use.
Issues of, yeah.
It's a use issue.
Right.
This is a big business, wedding events. Yes, big business. They're not doing it for fun.
Well, I mean, maybe those are others. I mean, in the original one, we wanted to leave those criteria, but if you want to change those, then we need to, open that up more too. We didn't look at
I think I remember weeks from April. You know, some of the discussion, or at least in my head, maybe I was just talking to myself, but you know, a special event, it should be special.
Right,
Because if you're doing it all the time,
Right, it's not special,
you're doing it.
right.
So is the Trumansburg Fair a special event?
No, it's not because it's in the A2 zone, and the A2 zone is specifically designed for having events. So,
So let's say Silver Queen Farm, they're having a wedding, it's no longer a special event, right? Because they're.
Right,
they're
they have it all the time.
Basically, we're interested in health and welfare, right?
Yeah, and if it's a farm, if it's truly a farm, you know, probably their argument will be weddings are a natural extension of a farm operation. It's like farm tourism. There's-
right, and we particularly allow that in the zoning call it out as something that we want to encourage.
So is across the way special because it's not zoned for camping? Is that why?
it's not zone,
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
what I
residential
was-
zone, and camping is not considered, an allowable use by either right or by permit, special permit.
So at an Agard?
Agard is,
Agard's in the
Was that
agricultural
special?
zone, nope,
no,
So never a special
it
event.
was never an issue,
But you still need a health department
you
Yeah.
did,
permit for
that's true,
over some
but you
number
didn't
of
need our special
campsites,
event permit.
right.
which is like 5 or something small, right? Where you need
Yeah,
that.
it's more than 5 campsites, but it's over, you have to have it over more than a couple, it's a certain hour period, because there's an event happening on Agard this coming week. The health department is not regulated to camping because it's like one night, and they don't care about that. So that it doesn't meet the health department's requirements, but in the agricultural zone, which constitutes 85% of the town outside village, camping is one of the allowable uses. So that's how, you know, you can have camping. Nobody comes to us for camping anymore. That's in the agricultural zone. It's just been in the residential zones that we've gotten, we've had dealt with 2 issues, so.
So I guess we think that we need to include, we need to be more clear about the agricultural. In the things that are not considered special events for this chapter, we have to add some wording. I'm just trying to see how we're going forward. from
I
here.
don't know if we need to add it to this, but I think it would be, because if we're ultimately gonna take this to a public education session, and I think that the FAQs were useful, whether or not someone disagreed or disagreed. I think the FAQs were useful for the exotic animal law, because I think it helped answer some commonly asked questions. And so I think it'd be very useful for that to be able to be very clear, because we've had public comments concerned that this is that making tweaks to this is going to inhibit agricultural activity.
But so maybe we, should include some wording in there, held on commercial property with it, or, whatever is the wording for our agricultural event. In here in addition to the FAQ, so that when people read it, they know it. I mean, I can make a note of that, and the other thing that we need to include, which is somehow I left out the 5 days
Right,
thing when I inserted the other, so I could put those 2 things in and we can send it to Nate's
Yeah.
office to look at those other things, some cutoffs, reviewing it and the wording that's in here, and then come back again, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Step,
that makes sense.
Right, I'll fix what I messed up there.
Does the board want to make any further discussion on the threshold of which in the current draft or in the current law, the code officer has discretion for 5 events?
I think 2 is all right.
Yeah. I think too.
I was just trying to straddle
Yeah.
something between 1
I
and
think 2 is
5,
okay.
where there was a lot of back reaction
Right.
to 1, and so I thought, well, 2, it's still a special event, and
Right.
beyond that, that's why I suggest
I
that's
think
all
I'm
I'm saying.
okay with 2.
So I think one of the other big things that rocks in that's in here is referral. So if it goes to the town board, there's a referral to the planning board. I just want to flag that,
Right,
that adds a step to the process.
Right, why does it need to go?
which
to
is
the
why we
planning
put the
board?
45 days.
I'm not married either way.
Right.
but Certainly,
Well,
you
just
put it to somebody.
when all of the discussion was happening about something big and all kinds of, stuff there on the property, if the CEO isn't deciding
Right,
that maybe we want somebody besides just us to look at that, someone who thinks about egress and impacts on the surrounding area and everything like that, and that's what the planning board does, so that's why I thought that having the planning board review it and make a recommendation to us might make sense, but it does increase the timeline for
Right.
giving the application, which is why we put that 45 days in. But it's totally up to the board, that was the thinking.
Nate, do you think that's necessary?
I think it's really up to your discretion, what you need to do or not. Is it necessary? No, but.
I think we could reserve the right in each case to look at it. Some we may be comfortable with, and some we may want additional input for the planning board to look at it, but if it's a straight ahead thing without egress or without environmental concerns or without, then it's probably more straightforward for us to make a choice.
I think you'll want to think about the timeline then. So if it's 45 days before an event, I just assume people are going to submit things at the very last possible.
Right,
And 45 days ensures there will be a planning board meeting and a town board meeting
Right.
happening at some point. But I don't know if those necessarily would line up in the order that you want them to, so you might end up needing
well, we could always ask the planning board to have a special meeting.
Yeah. The other thing I think I was reacting to a little in reading through all the public comment was just this, whatever, about government taking control and just, these 3 people on the town board. And so at least if the planning board or another organization that we have, has staggered terms, it's not just elected, it's not just 3 people, makes a recommendation, the board can still reject it, but at least it's been looked at by more eyes. It might feel like a more justifiable decision.
Well,
That's all that's partly where I was coming from in reviewing the comments. I was trying to take them into
Well,
account.
I think the comments are very interesting because it's interesting to me that that someone would have a problem with 3 people reviewing as
and
opposed
not
to
one,
one person. One
Right.
person who can't be held accountable.
Right,
for
but the
voting.
one person seems more separated from politics. It's perception. It's not, I mean,
So-
I was just trying to deal with the.
I would like to,
And
I would just like to come back to something that Rich, you were very concerned about finding out there were 800 campsites
Right,
on that property. So under the current proposal of 2 special events, the town board would have no discretion, the planning board would have no discretion
On
over
those,
that.
right,
On those. So I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with that when that transpires again. So. Because that's how many special event permits are currently being used for that particular property.
yeah,
So,
so. I mean, Mark he did his thing. I mean, I don't think they did anything untoward or he followed the books. The rules.
oh, yeah, no, I'm
He
not,
did well.
no, I think Mark, I have no complaint about Mark. I just remember you being surprised
How many,
and not necessarily happy, which is why we, in the last iteration, we talked about possibly having the town board review based on the size of the event as opposed to the
I think
number of
that's an
events.
interesting idea. That anything over 500 people, maybe the town board weighs in on. Or has a review, some kind of review. Is that done there?
I think you could do this whichever way you want it to do, honestly. Because it's setting, I mean, this is legislative discretion. What is it that you as a town board want to keep as the
Right.
authority?
Right,
I can tell you, I don't want to slow down. I don't want to slow down smaller events.
right.
I don't want to inhibit
Well,
smaller
what's a
events.
smaller event?
Well, I mean, I think you have, 200
Fine.
people and 52 cars and, I don't see that being as a particularly large event. I think it'd be useful for the planning board to have reviewed an 800 site campground
I
that's got
agree.
2,000+ people. I mean, that might be where and that's where I think that necessarily having more review is not correlated to the number of events per se necessarily, but to the
size.
size and the potential impact to the public.
I-
And I'm not trying to penalize grassroots. I think this should be true for anybody who's engaging in large events. And there's no way to predict in the future. This area is booming.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to have an event here?
They do.
So.
And hence the hotel.
Exactly. People want to have events here, which is great.
Public safety, is what
Yeah,
we need to
Yeah.
make sure we have covered,
right,
fire, sanitation.
yeah, water.
So one of the things to just think of, we're using a person count metric for triggering reviews. You know, it's like, how do we know how many people are in the event? Well, we make them count. Okay, but let's say it's 1,000 people that visit the event over the course of 8 hours. They're not all there for the full 8 hours, so maybe they never end up reaching or exceeding a particular threshold of 300, you know, at any given hour. But 2,000 people end up showing up over that. I mean, we have to think through those things, if that's the metric. that we're
Woodstock, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we managed.
I just wonder also if it's just gonna seem like, you know, the town board, you know, changes. Its composition
Right,
pretty regularly, or could change its composition pretty regularly, and so. Let's say an event like grassroots that is established, it might make it very difficult for an event like that to feel like they could keep going forward every year because, or with the same procedure, should we get them to
Okay.
agree to the right procedure? Because I think this is gonna be a comment and an argument that's made. I'm not
here's my
taking a
position.
position on it one way or the other. I am thinking that it is something based on all the
It
comments we
was,
got
it
before.
was self-inflicted.
No, that was,
It
I
was
know.
totally
I know, but
self-inflicted.
this is a law that we're making, saying something has to happen every time this way. I'm just reflecting on,
That's
all
right,
the
it's
public
complex,
comment.
complex, we don't have to decide
no,
right now.
right,
Today.
I'm just, I'm not necessarily arguing
You're something
against
that
doing
big,
that.
a head count may be in order.
If you know 800 campsites were sold, average probably 3 or 4 people in each campsite, that's 2,400 to 3,000 people. So we know that. We knew that before it started, that they were gonna have 800 campsites. Right, so we knew,
That across the way.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, at the time that somebody applies, right, it's what is your reasonable expectation of attendance at the event?
Right.
That is, if you use,
It's on our permit application. We're
yeah,
supposed to-
if that's the
Right.
metric that we use for triggering different levels of review, then that's what we're gonna do, and then that's the permit you're issued. You're issued a 500 person permit,
right,
not a 1,000 person permit. We find out, actually had this happen with one. They found out that the event was in fact selling, I think it was selling camping for a very small place. But camping and tickets to a festival, and they're like, there's 500 people who bought tickets. We know that there's that many people, you know, they're only expecting like 100.
right.
And we ended up, you know, getting a bunch of photos because they couldn't afford, they relied on the county to do their code enforcement, there were no employees. Like, how in the world are we gonna prove a violation? We pulled a bunch of photos from Facebook. You know, with timestamps, I just counted the number of people up. It's like, yeah, no, you exceeded it.
That's what you don't want to pay your attorney to do.
No.
How many people are in this
No, it's not.
photo?
It's not.
Uh,
But anyway, I mean, that's the type of.
All right, so let's mull it over. You're gonna get some language, you have questions to figure out. Well, let's bring it back on the agenda.
I think the threshold for the town board having to review it should be pretty high,
How-
but I don't know, like 1,000 to 2,000 people
Yeah.
maybe. But I do think at that level, there's significant potential public impact. And there's value in having a planning board look at it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people to review something. That's
Right.
not 1 or 2 people to review it.
Right.
I think it puts a lot of pressure on staff to make these decisions.
Yeah, I agree,
And then be criticized
right,
when the decision is 800 campsites. I'm not saying that's not about you. That's just what came to mind is that, or the noise or whatever. And then that's a lot of stress for one individual to bear. So. Okay, so I think we
I'll
have a,
add those things in, I'll send it. We can get
okay,
input back. Is that the process
Yeah.
that we're doing? Yes.
yep, sounds good.
Or we're not very far through.
I don't know if I'm gonna make it.
Well, there are some things that.
Can we do
could-
what we have to do?
Yeah, yep, and we can. I would like to quickly do The OSC audit compliance,
Okay,
update, the IT update. Michelle's here for this, and she's also here for the department budget meeting, and those are the second one, the number, letter D, not number D, is fast. Michelle, do you want to give us a quick
Yeah, sure.
status update?
Hello, everybody. So we sent along what we're calling the request for proposals, with lots of different names being tossed around, but this has been reviewed fairly extensively through the IT committee. And, I believe that Nate did take a look at it. I think, yeah,
Yes.
you did take a look at it.
I confirm that too.
Yeah, we also got some help from our municipal friends, the IT director at the county did a line by line review with me for, the clarity's sake. And also it was looked at by the town of Ithaca's IT person. So we've gotten a lot of feedback about this because internally, we don't have a ton of command over this topic, but I feel confident that the document now reflects what we're looking for as far as the next phase of modernizing our IT systems go. So, this document came along in the agenda packet along with a 2-pager memo that explains the different phases that we're tackling as far as our IT modernization process goes. And so, this RFP is meant to find services to create a plan, a strategic plan, and then a very operational based project management plan out of that. So, I think we're in good shape and we're putting it before the board because we want to put this RFP out there. Hopefully by the end of the month. Yeah, it's quite a long document.
Yeah.
The RFP is,
okay.
yeah,
All right.
the RFP is separate pages. So we want to put this out there and we're not sure what's going to come back. We don't know what the market for something like this looks like. So it is a big question mark. And, once we get responses back, we'll be bringing them back to the board and we'll go from there. So,
Okay, go for it.
the 2-page document does outline the way that we're addressing
There's a two-page
the audit
document.
report.
This one is the memorandum one.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So there are some known costs associated with that. So, given the time, I'm happy to go through each phase. But it is included in that document, so.
And we're gonna use ARPA funds for this, right? Is that what we?
We discussed it. So, that is a possibility, correct?
Yeah, that was one of the tentative potential earmarks of 75,000 for phase 1.
All right, so when are we gonna decide that?
Nothing to decide, we're just presenting.
No, when
Yeah.
is the board gonna decide how
Oh,
the ARPA money is gonna be used?
So we can put the RFP out, and then if we decide to proceed forward with services, then at that point, going into the contract, we allocate where the funding is gonna come from. So if it's through ARPA, it's through ARPA, if it's through something else, it's
Okay.
that, so.
We tentatively set aside some money
Yeah.
for IT.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the ARPA funds.
Paper, to pay on paper,
Yeah.
not in anything
Yeah.
official.
I mean, the only thing that made me gasp was the software licensing, which is 6480 a year.
yeah, yeah,
Every
so
year.
we're entering that's one of the many things that is outdated with our IT systems is that Microsoft is no longer providing a one-shot deal. You get this software and then you let it outdate on your computer. It's now all subscription based. So that's one of those heavy lifts that it's just, things are getting more expensive as far as IT goes, and it's the way of the future. So we have a little bit of a financial hill to get over before we are caught up with things. But yeah, that is an unfortunate annual expense that we'll be incurring.
It's not exclusive to us, though. This is a problem for small municipalities. And I actually, I'm chairing the new TCOG subcommittee on IT and cybersecurity. We had a meeting today. And looking at ways to do shared or collaborative services on software is actually one of our top priorities. What kind of software? We were talking in particular, potentially code and planning, because our estimates on code and planning can be about $30,000 for software. Town of Ithaca, it's my understanding, but don't hold me to it, is that they spent $80,000 and we're not happy with what they got.
Hmm.
So that's kind of software is very expensive. There might be some, scales that we could look at. This might be something that we could push. If there are enough municipalities in Tompkins County, we could push the county that say we give you a contribution and you provide this. The way Laserfish is, something like that. And that's not a direct parallel, but anyway, software, shared software services is one of the primary stated goals of the new subcommittee, because this is a problem across
Yeah.
the board.
Mhm.
So
Cool. All right,
we're looking at options there.
all right. Hold on.
Well, I want to say a shout out to Michelle, she for how much work and time has gone into this, because the RFP there was no obvious RFP we could borrow from. So this was all built by hand, and I think the other municipalities, I've got multiple municipalities who are eagerly waiting us to approve this so they can look at it and use it as a model, because it's a daunting thing to put together, and she's worked very closely
Thank you, Michelle.
with the county in particular to make it happen.
I will say, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Don't feel obligated.
No, I mean, it's great to get something like that and be like, too many comments. But yeah.
So does anybody else have anything they wanted to talk about on that? If not, we can move on to the department budget meetings and RSVP schedule. So, I printed off for everybody but Roxanne. A copy of it, of when those department meetings are. So, you need to RSVP. She's assuming I will be in all of these. We might structure that I will bow out if there are 2 other board members who want to attend, because I think there's real value in having the robust conversation. But that might, or if I need to be there also, I'll be there as well. If there are 3 of us, it will go to, we'll go to a public meeting. So she needs to have you RSVP by September 8th for the meetings you would like to attend.
Okay.
So we can do the necessary notice. Is there anything else on that, Michelle, that you wanted to get into?
Nope.
Okay. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay, comprehensive plan update. I want to thank Roxanne for putting together language that went out in the newsletter. Have we gotten any volunteer applications? I haven't seen any.
No. So we'll keep it running. And so, I mean, maybe, another meeting, probably not tonight, because it's longer for
Feels
other
like
things.
going forever, yeah.
Right. Yeah, we can, talk about, we can have it on the agenda, like a structure for the committee,
Yep.
at least like how many people, what we're thinking we want to have as general public members, other members, so I think that was what we were gonna talk about next, but I don't think it has to be tonight, but maybe at the next meeting.
Sounds good. Well, this is
Yeah.
gonna become a standing item, so.
But like if we have a
flexible.
targeted thing,
Yeah.
what we can, I could try to draft something, or you and I could, or whatever,
Sure.
and then, put it out,
Sounds good.
since we're the liaisons to. the
Exactly.
existing Committee.
Exactly.
And for the new business item, if people, want to wait on that for another meeting too, it's fine.
Okay.
It depends. It's not anything that's a crisis. I just noticed when I was sending it to, our new person who'd like to be appointed to the committee, that it really is pretty outdated and that we should fix it in. So within that, I noticed a couple things that are, inconsistencies with what we do or what we have that we might want to change. And so,
I printed that out for the board.
right,
in
but I
color.
can just write that out a little bit more too, and then it, it's easier to have a quicker discussion of it next time if you want. Anyway, I'm not wedded to having that.
Bye, Michelle. Thank you.
But if you want to, I can. I mean, it's not super complicated, but it will take time. So.
Well, I personally didn't have any concerns about how your proposed modifications. But it might make sense to take a vote on that at the next meeting. We did do a resolution because you wanted to have a discussion, which I think is great. What does the board feel? Do you want to talk about it more tonight or?
So there is one, so there's one thing with that though, that's why I sent the thing from the state, and somehow I just lost my everything.
GML Article 12.
Right, so that says basically, right now we have it appointed, well, I think the board changed it to appointing people for staggered terms, right?
Mhm.
And, oh yeah, here it is, okay. Right, but I was gonna say staggered terms as described by whatever that resolution is. I don't know what those staggered terms were, but in that article that outlines the guidelines for CACs, it says every 2 years, they're appointed for 2 years, maximum of 2 years. And then, I take that to read, they could be reappointed, but it's a 2-year appointment, so we might just wanna still stagger it, but a year at a time.
Yeah,
So
that's what we
that was
do.
just one thing I wanted to raise, 'cause it's different than we do now. And then, the other issues we have with that are, we tried to keep notes. It's been difficult because people keep changing who's doing it and all. And so when it says shall, that means like you're in some kind of violation if you don't do it.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm not used to you being here in person. I'm sorry.
Oh.
So I didn't put my printing.
And so if we were working under those guidelines, the CAC needs to keep notes, which would be a good thing, and I try to do that. We don't have them consistently. We should do it probably, and then we have to write an annual report that gets submitted to the commissioner of DEC, which we have not yet done, but so if the board wants those things, then, we keep this wording that it's operating under those guidelines, and those guidelines say shall a lot. And so legally shall means like you have to do that or,
Yeah,
right, so. So those are just the two things that are a little bit not quite in line with how it's been so far. So if we want them to align and keep them that way, then that's fine. Or if we don't think that they can stay that way, then we should change that wording. We're not gonna operate exactly under those guidelines. So maybe thought about or whatever. It's what I noticed when I went through it all. Because this was done a long time ago, 2016, so. I hadn't
Yeah, I would
really
just-
looked at it closely until recently,
I would just stagger it in the context of 1 and 2.
right? But so then, yeah, the other ones are basically we'll try to figure out a way for the committee to do that, to have minutes when we meet and
Oh, yeah.
write a report at the end of the year. Are the other two ones.
Okay,
But those were the only other things I wanted to fix. Other than, and then I wrote in this sort of example topic areas because it's the original resolution said, this is what'll happen in 2016 or
Oh.
example things for 2016, so. If it's not something that's like
no, it's
be
great.
done every year, that I tried to draft those and see if you think they're okay. If you want to vote on it next time, whatever.
Well, the only thing is that, if we resolve to pass this, then, in a couple of years, we may be working on different things.
No, these are just
Right.
example topic
Oh.
areas as of 2022. I just thought it was a good idea to put some examples of
Yeah, they're
things
not
that the
open.
CSAC would be doing.
Yeah,
That isn't gonna go in the resolution.
Well, this kind of is, this
That
is
was
a
the-
modification of the original
Oh,
resolution that
nice.
was passed that established the CSAC,
Yes.
which I sent the original one to.
Need to modify its annual work plan, so they're not stuck with this.
Right. But I mean, we can take them on if you want. I just thought. it
No, I think it's not bad to have
reasonable
it
to
there.
say
yeah.
what sorts, a lot of these things are. Ongoing. They're not things that are you're just gonna do for a year.
Sadly, will not solve the climate crisis
No.
in any given year. So, well, how about this goes to legal review? It will get you electronic copy. If there are any other changes you wanted to make after tonight, why don't we get made a copy? So you can weigh in if there's anything that needs to be modified in your perception. And then we can bring it back for a further discussion and tweaking in a resolution next meeting.
All right, yeah, I can send you this.
Great.
I'll add that, this, like, the terms thing that is in line with that. The guys, the GML, well,
I would propose that something we can, so if we're moving on, are we okay to move on? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Moving on to the remote meeting policy, I did provide, a draft. This is the version that Nate put together based on, our feedback that we wanted it to look more like the villages. So this is in that way, it's a simpler, version potentially. So we're under, the governor did extend the executive order, again through September 12th. So we could realistically just pick this up and discuss at the next meeting. But I would like to prioritize this high on the agenda for the next meeting, because I would like to get our procedures
All right.
kind of put in place, because who knows how long.
right. I have one question on this, which is that there's another whole section that's members of public bodies are permitted to attend and participate using video conferencing under circumstances that do not qualify as extraordinary circumstances if they comply with these things. And so I just wasn't sure what sorts of things would not be extraordinary under the new definition of extraordinary circumstances, because somebody would just want to stay home for no reason and be okay with the public coming to their house. I just was wondering what would fit under this, and if we really need this, because it sort of repeats everything that was said above it, except for that one thing about having to say where you're gonna be and have it be accessible to the
It's
public.
extremely confusing.
So, yeah,
So what I was perceiving with this is, I'm the one who's been pushing for having a way to be able to attend. I want to preserve a board member's ability, in non-extraordinary circumstances to be able to attend remotely, because I could see an instance where it's not an extraordinary circumstance, but you do have a meeting that butts up and you can't physically get back to town hall at 7 o'clock for a meeting, but you still want to participate, but you are in Lansing and you have a meeting that runs till 6:30, and there's no, I'm saying that there are circumstances where you could know in advance that your schedule is not flexible enough, but it may prohibit you from participating. You could participate remotely for the first 30 minutes while you're driving in potentially. Maybe you can do that because you have to have a location.
but the people couldn't then come to that location.
But I can see that there might be instances where that it's not a caregiving issue, it's not an emergency, that I don't think it'd be triggered very often, but I also don't think we lose anything by still providing a carve out for someone to be attending remotely.
But this doesn't do that, because this is, right? What's written here doesn't do what you want, because it talks about video conferencing under extraordinary circumstances. I don't see what it says we're.
Well, there's another whole section
Under
for
non-
non-extraordinary.
Number
So
2.
that's
Oh.
what I was asking about, when that would
I see.
really apply, and it repeats the same thing except for this, having to give 5 days advance notice and be access at a location accessible to the public. And so I'm just wondering what beyond the extraordinaries.
Is that policy the same in 1A as where the physical person, the member is participating from a remote location that is not open to in-person physical attendance, may not be counted to the quorum, but may participate in vote if there is a quorum of
Right.
members at the physical
Yeah,
location
that was
open to the
my other
public.
question, was we don't say anything about how that person counts for a quorum in the non-extraordinary circumstance. So if we're gonna keep this section, we might need to address that. Just a little bit looking at that number 2 section, number 2, it's number 2 on the thing, on the policies, and it's. Make
Yeah,
sure
so
it makes sense.
So the idea, right, is that the public has the ability to access the physical under non-extraordinary circumstances. The public has the ability to also be present physically at that other location.
Right.
And so a member who is participating remotely from this other site, which is publicly accessible, can count towards the quorum, I believe, for purposes of quorum requirements.
Right. But that's not in here right now, so we should add that if we keep it,
Yeah, I'm not,
because we talk about what's a quorum and what's not.
yeah, we could add that expressly. It's not something that I believe had been I'm trying to remember if it had been stated in your current remote
Right.
policy or not. But that's the default understanding.
I see it being less as another example I could think of in terms of being able to attend remotely is you're teaching a class. And you get done, 15 minutes or half an hour before your planning board meeting starts. You're an unpaid volunteer to the planning board. But you could remotely attend from your office. You could advertise, the public could come there, they could attend. It's not, and so this isn't just the town board, this affects everybody that is triggered by open meetings. So, while I don't really see it being an issue for town board members per se, I want to be sensitive to the fact that we have unpaid volunteers. And I would like to
Right.
create as much flexibility that's reasonable and appropriate.
But I don't think it's appropriate that out of a location where, let's say, somebody's in a Cornell office, who's a member of the planning board, has to open up their office to the public for them to participate in the planning board meeting and have a vote. That
But it's-
seems
But it's
extreme.
not extraordinary. In that case, it wouldn't be extraordinary. You could be teaching that class all semester long. It's
That's
not
right.
extraordinary.
Right. I'm saying,
So,
So you'd have to post it 5 days, minimum 5 days. of the papers.
right.
I think it's an absurd thing.
Or else you
Yeah,
can't.
does it have to be like that, or?
Is that
Yeah.
state law?
So the understanding I have of the change to the state law is that the old process for attending remotely by video conferencing still applies. And what we're also trying to do is take your existing remote policy to the extent possible and preserve that in the new video policy that is being adopted. So if, like, there is a general requirement where if you're holding a meeting, special meeting or otherwise, you need to be putting out a public notice of the time and place of that meeting. If you're adding a new physical meeting location for remote attendance, then we should be publishing that additional location.
But your
of the
car, but
meeting.
given the modern world in Zoom, you could be in your car and that's your location and you're moving all over the place. It's an outdated idea.
Well, and again, though, right, remember, the idea is, what we're talking about is not extraordinary circumstance. Right? This is a known routine issue that you have identified in advance, and if you're going to be attending under these non-extraordinary circumstances, park yourself in a place that the public
That's
can
ridiculous.
access.
They can access you on Zoom. That's what, they can access you through
Yeah,
the,
why the
why the
physical
physical
requirement?
requirement?
Well-
There's a physical requirement because the public has a right to see and observe, and part of that is often, there's a reason why you have to have your video on when you are attending remotely. The ability to see your body language and how you physically are responding in certain ways is an important feature of attending during a meeting. And so that's why I think video conferencing is meant to be under extraordinary circumstances. You don't have to allow the public to enter because it's expected that this is not regular and routine. I think what Caitlin is trying to do is, if it's not extraordinary, the public has the right to also be physically present to also observe you during that.
I can tell you anecdotally that I was told this by an attorney for the municipality in Tompkins County, and I won't say which one, so I'm not inadvertently disclosing something. It's not my right to disclose. But I was told that they had a board member who under this policy, the existing policy of publishing addresses, because of physical issues, was out for like 9 months.
Right.
Not a single time did anybody show up to this
Right.
individual's house, even though their address was posted. So what I'm saying is that for extraordinary circumstances, which are pretty broad, you don't have to post your address. You can zoom in from Colorado when you're on vacation there. Great. I want to preserve that ability to do it. But what I'm simply saying is that we might have some unintended expectations and discover that we are losing potentially great volunteers who aren't able to attend under the extraordinary
Yeah.
meeting policy. And I'm just trying to carve out a space for them. And I don't think it hurts us to be a little bit more flexible. I don't think most people will end up using it,
Right.
but I don't think it hurts us in any way to allow it to continue. So that's why I've been pushing for it. I'm just trying to be as flexible within a reasonable way as possible.
So then we should perhaps think of taking out J under 2, which says virtual attendance should be used sparingly with the expectation that the meeting, the members will be physically present at the meetings, because it sounds like the idea of this is to allow something like the examples were like, it's regular, you know, you have this new class that you're teaching, and you can't make it back, and then additional requirements again say virtual should be used sparingly, so I just think it might be a little confusing, and we should figure out a little more clearly what we're saying. I mean, if that's what we're saying about the non-extraordinary, that you want to establish a regularly repeating way that people can do this, that's okay, but you know, the last item of that says it should be really sparing, so that's not regularly repeating, so I just think it's a little confusing. We should just be a tiny bit clearer on that.
I think that's a very helpful comment. I was trying to make it as evergreen as possible.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's
Yeah.
Right.
fine, it just seems.
No,
like
I
it's
think that's
only
a
very
contradiction.
occasionally that it's kind of extraordinary anyways.
And I mean, I guess this prompt a discussion if you want more of it, but. Is there a limit? I mean, if it's meant to be something that's utilized by somebody on a regular basis. You know, is there a limit to how many meetings they
Right.
want somebody
Right.
to be able to attend remotely? Is there some threshold?
Yeah, so maybe we can just do that. We can think about it with like a threshold or something, and instead of the should be used sparingly, like, you know, but have a, you know, a cutoff or any extraordinary circumstance.
Because
should
I
be
can hear,
sparingly,
I can
yeah.
hear Caitlin thinking 100% of the meetings potentially remote, because that ensures that you have the ability to draw on the broadest pool of people. to
Right.
Fill some of these boards and.
There's some mind reading going on there. I mean, and that's, you know, that's one of the things I think that, at least in my experience going through, I prefer to meet in person with you, but I also think you can still have substantive debate.
I look at COVID, we
conversation
spent months, we
COVID,
stayed
exactly.
years remote.
Well, it's fine. I just think we
Yeah.
should be clear
Yeah,
on
yeah.
what we're saying. Are
I
we
agree.
setting up a remote thing where somebody could be, you
I
know, a town
personally-
board member and never come, or a planning board member and never, ever come to a meeting, but as long as they publish it at their house and say every time I'm gonna be home, they never come. Are we okay with that?
So one of
okay,
the,
I'm
one of
okay
the
with that.
challenges might be though, if you can't get enough of your board members to actually
Be
come in
here,
person
because you
to
won't
have a quorum.
So that guy who could vote still needs a 3-person quorum here.
Oh,
So-
I thought that person counted as part of the quorum. That was the question I had.
Only if
Not-
only if 3 people are here.
Even with the non-extraordinary circumstances.
Right, so I mean, I think you're right, don't
I
we do maintain.
thought
You have to have a quorum in
Three
person.
people.
Oh,
I
that's what,
did say that my understanding was that somebody can count towards a quorum.
Only if the
It's-
quorum is already here.
However, yours, town policy require 3 people physically present here.
right.
So I think what I've said about my understanding of state law is you could have a bunch of people attending remotely.
But we don't
for
do
video
that.
conferencing,
Okay.
but you don't do that. You specifically require 3 people to be present here,
Okay,
which is your quorum.
So that I guess is open for debate then. That's something we might want to think about. I would say at the next board meeting,
Right.
if we're comfortable. I mean, I always think the public should have the ability to attend a physical location. But how many people need to be present at that physical location if you're providing an option for them to participate via our video conferencing? So
Yeah, it's a question.
it is, let's think about that. Let's have that be our chief
Right.
question for next. time.
sorry, I just.
No, it's a-
thought that
it's great.
there's Some inconsistency that we might want to.
Says virtual attendance does not qualify for making quorum.
On which the,
That's on ours on this, but Nate's saying that under state law, that might not be the case. Maybe we could, if we could clarify that.
Yeah, the prior state law, which is what allowed non-extraordinary circumstance attendance, was not very,
Right.
you know, it is not as detailed as what the state has now put out about extraordinary circumstances. But the state has also said the old way of doing it still also applies. So it's like, try to read it all together. Again, it's still new. I mean, lots of
Always
questions,
challenging.
not a lot of very clear answers.
Yeah.
It'll get litigated probably at some point, hopefully not by us.
Yeah,
Right, so we just don't want to be confusing.
No.
no,
Policy in case people get upset about
Right.
some decision that's made by some board and say
Right.
it wasn't.
right.
That's all I'm saying. Sorry.
okay,
But-
Okay.
what's next?
Okay, so up next is, we'll bring back a revised draft for next meeting. So setting up a, temporary pay rate, this is on the, regular resolutions page, which I've put somewhere, it's on this one. Under new business. Niels will be joining us. He's now, it's, as you might not be surprised to hear based on conditions in our area, he had a hard time finding a lease.
Yeah.
And so he was able to lock one in. He's gonna start with us on the 26th. He's going to take the civil service exam like beginning of October, which is,
26th of September.
that's his new start date. But what I would like to do is the way his salary breaks down per hour, it breaks down to 36.05 dollars per hour. What I would like to do is I would like to bring him in as he is able. He might not be able to do very many hours because he's obviously in the literal process of moving across country. But I was hoping to bring him in to talk of budget meetings. I'd like him to be a part of the budget process because September 26th is pretty late to be a part of that conversation. I'd also like to ask him to remotely attend planning and BZA meetings. So he can help start with that transition process to take over in October, but I'd also like to pay him to
Sure.
do that. So we don't have any problem.
Budget wise, it's.
Budget, we're
we've saved
rolling in
fortune.
dough.
Exactly. And that's why I figured you wouldn't be too concerned. We're doing just fine in that budget
So
line.
moved.
All those in favor or any, aye, thank
It makes sense. Good.
thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, I printed a resolution and handed it out. There's a small packet on the water information that Carissa sent out yesterday. Carissa, I have a copy of this resolution if it passes, so I can send it to you electronically. So basically what we need to do is that Carissa put this report together. We're overdue to deal with some upgrades that we know that we've needed to do and haven't quite handled. At this juncture, there are two things that we have to take care of. One is our meter reading software, which is different than the billing software. It's sell by date, right? It's not going to work anymore for us. And then our meter reader itself is actually failing. We cannot repurchase one exactly like it. We can borrow one for a period of time, but it has to be scheduled, and this is not ideal. And Carissa has spent I'm not saying too much time, but time having to look into seeing what we can do. And so she's researched all of her options. So the long and the short of it is, we're going to be proposing, or we are proposing that we go ahead and purchase the software. The software price is here. The resolution is to approve the purchase of the water software for up to $5,000. It's going to come in, it's estimated to come in less than that, but we just wanted to, make sure we had a little buffer. That will become available essentially, effectively immediately or relatively immediately. So that money would be paid for. We've got a budget modification. That money would come out of the, we had tentatively, well, not tentatively, the plan in the 2022 budget was to allocate almost $22,000 into the new capital reserve for Water District 3. And we're proposing to pay for the software update from that reserves, the designated reserve fund. So that will reduce how much money goes into the reserve to just shy of 17,000. The meter reader that we need, it is not, we need to put in an order for it. We will not be paying for it or receiving it until 2023. So we don't need to take any budget modifications on that right now. It's currently back ordered. But if we don't get we don't put our name on the list, it's just going to continue to be back ordered. So we need to get it sooner rather than later. So I'm asking for approval for ordering and eventually purchasing it. But a budget modification or the 2023 budget will actually allocate where that money is coming from. That'll be in the actual 2023 budget.
So moved.
Second, any further discussion? I'd like to say a shout out to Michael. Thank you for working with Chris on this and helping us get through getting this stuff done. So thank you very much. So all those in favor? Aye. Thank you. The fire EMS meeting is on the 25th. I do hear your frustration. It's been an ongoing frustration, I think, for many years about the whole fire EMS process.
But this is just more than that. This is like an insult.
Yeah, it's like no, no.
To 1 week to try to book, to ask us if we can come.
Well, so I've asked Jordan, I sent an email seeing if we can record it. I will get you the budget information in advance of it. So what they're looking at is a fairly flat increase in fire. They're looking at a sizable hit in EMS because EMS costs are going up. Fire is not expected to go up much.
Like every year.
So what happens to all that discussion? I remember listening in on changing the structure of the charging for fire. That's not still being discussed.
It is still being discussed.
Is it being discussed at this meeting? Because I think that's really something that the board should have a better notice about, 'cause that's a big deal.
Well, it's been something that's been going on, it's been discussed now for multiple years and they
Right.
haven't yet implemented it. They'll frankly get, so here's the thing, is we have to have fire service and we need to have. I don't see us cutting fire and I don't see us cutting EMS services. We don't have a whole lot of options. They get to say the price and we get to say whether or not we get to pay it.
We don't
So,
really get to say whether or not.
well.
We have to pay.
Well, no, I mean, we could go with another service provider and the board actually did look into that a couple of years ago. Michael and I were part of that, looking into it. And the sentiment of the board was this is a more affordable option than our
fire?
alternatives for fire also sizably.
We talked about it.
Oh, no, I found what the alternative was in terms of paying for service from Ithaca, because that's our other option.
They would do that?
I talked to the police chief, I talked to the fire chief about it in
Well,
20.
it's a change from before. That's interesting.
They were, they were willing to do it. I
It's like the firewall, whatever
No,
color that is.
he was willing to talk to me about it. I
When
mean,
we talked about it like years ago, so interesting.
price tag is very different. I don't know if they'd be willing to do it now. I think that's it's a completely different circumstance. I talked to him like super early,
Yeah.
that year,
There's also, it's too far.
for part, well,
Part of it might be feasible, you know?
yeah,
There's that anyway.
the price tag was
Station
at
on
that
the hill.
point, it was 56 cents per 1,000 for the local and $2.50 per 1,000 for the, like, so there was just no.
So let me ask you, we never got to do a doodle poll.
They didn't send it out to, they sent it out to the supervisors. They didn't send it out to all the town board members because they wanted to make sure the
So like
supervisors were there.
5 people, 4 people.
I just think that's really inappropriate.
That never happened before. It never happened.
I'm sorry, this is the
No,
first time
that-
I've done that
I
part.
know, I'm just saying, we always had plenty of notice so we could be there.
I've asked for it to be recorded. I'll get you the materials.
But it is different than being able to be in the.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. I don't disagree. So if there's anything in particular you want me to push for, I do know fire is expected to stay fairly flat. EMS costs are going up everywhere. I know that it's my understanding that Banks has been cutting some of their service provisions, so it's making it more expensive for us because it means we're backing them up instead of them backing us up as much. Costs are going up because they have to raise, in some cases, they're having to raise, not just, I'm not locally, but nationwide with EMS. Salaries have not been as competitive as the market will bear. And so in order to
Yeah.
keep, we lost
We
somebody in
all- we
EMS.
all- we all understand.
So, but what Nate and I had a pretty good conversation today about what might be some of our options. And one of the things I'm gonna be suggesting we look at is our rates. In terms of how much we're billing and if our billing rates, I don't wanna overly burden burden people who are needing to call for service. But if we're looking at sizable increases year after year in EMS, we need to look at our rate structure.
I thought they do, and they raise them and we follow those
Well,
village on the rates.
we have followed the village on the rates, but is it appropriate to just follow the village on the rates? Because if the rate increases are not in some way keeping up, then we're putting everything being underwritten is being passed on to the taxpayers.
Well, it's really being passed on to the insurers, to Medicare. Because most of the
I
people,
think that's the issue with the rate, that you're looking at, right? Because you can only charge the insurer whatever rate's been authorized, and so if your rate
right,
isn't capturing all the
Right.
available insurance companies.
Right.
So what we're gonna do is Nate had a very good idea. It's to go to and it is the same company that your other client uses, is to go and find out what other rates people are using in the region. What are appropriate, and find the scale of rates, because again, I don't want to adversely impact people needing to call for services, but at the same time, I don't want to have undercharge and get to the point where like, oh my God, our rates are so out of line that we have to make a big jump.
That's why we started to mirror theirs, because didn't they do a study?
Yeah,
I don't know if they've done a study recently.
What they did with this.
well, let's find out.
So, but again, and it might be that we just continue to mirror and but we kicked the tires and we did our due diligence and we feel comfortable with the rates we have. So, that's, yeah, so, and if I've asked for, a recording, it to be recorded, I know it's not ideal. If you are able to attend remotely or in person, please let me know. So,
Are you going? Okay.
oh, I'll be there. Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Okay, I don't think you need any of my upcoming events. Board member announcements or updates, anything new and exciting? I can let you know that Nate and I have worked a lot on Camp Barton documents, so you guys got a copy, you and everybody else in that group got a copy of the doc, and I don't remember what date we sent them at this point, but got a copy of operational documents and incorporation papers as a starting point. And so we have not, it's just that we're in that period of August where, got people going on fun vacations to Ireland. That's one of them. Which makes me sad. So I'm not that person. My guess is we'll have a sit down meeting after Labor Day to really kind of get into that. But I've been in communication with Red Bond. State seems to be moving along happily. We don't have final assessment on Barton or appraisals on Barton. We're kind of waiting on that, but there's no sizable roadblocks. And I haven't heard anything back yet about people's thoughts on the draft documents. So, but we'll get there.
So
They were sent to us or
No,
somebody else?
they were sent to the liaisons of the three municipalities.
So like you and,
Rich and Mike and Deb.
does it make sense to send them to the boards too, in case somebody else has because all the boards have to adopt them, right? So don't you want to know sooner rather than later if somebody else is gonna pop up with a problem?
Well, I think
That
that's why you
makes it
have
hard to do.
liaisons though, is that the liaisons are capable, we're gonna have to, they're gonna bring more, I don't know if this is even a draft version that people are gonna want to read back to their boards. So, because they submitted feedback on these documents originally in terms of what they wanted to see in them. Now they get a chance to see them, and it's all gonna come back to the boards. You're gonna have final say on whether or not you choose to sign on. So
So I know my point was just,
There's no,
if there
Yeah.
was an issue, then you might want it, the liaisons might want to hear about a concern.
sure,
One of the three you're dealing with three boards, and so rather than have it come it up later, it might be better to, or hear just a question or something that wasn't thought about, that because you have more people who are ultimately gonna have to make the decision looking at it, that's all. I'm
yeah,
saying.
I know.
I was
That's
just thinking it
fine.
Might make it easier.
Not a
I think that's fine. What I don't want to do is the board to be wedded to a particular draft, that then the rest of the other municipality liaisons are going down different pathways. So I would love feedback. That's great. I just don't want everybody to feel like, okay, well, we've approved this version.
No,
And
no,
then-
I mean for feedback, so here, see the direction it's going, and if anybody has a particular thought.
Sure, I will send it out. And if you have feedback, please
Right.
feel free to email Rich or I
Yeah, that was
that
all.
feedback. Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Do you guys feel a milestone would be reached in 23?
I'm sorry.
Like a milestone on process you're working on?
Yeah, so I would anticipate, like, the tentative timeline is that we anticipate we could go into a licensing agreement with New York State probably in the fourth quarter of next year.
Oh, okay.
Nobody wants to be responsible for it next summer. Just because we really want to have that whole time, right? So that's, but again, that tentative timeline was set in advance of having, the appraisal process is taking longer than was initially anticipated, just because it's so complex and there's so much demand backlog on appraisals
Yeah.
in the state. So that's taking longer, so it might even push it longer. I would hate, yeah, I'm hoping still that it's fourth quarter of 2023.
So no budget ramifications.
Yeah.
We're not anticipating
Yeah.
budget ramifications right now. The way we set it up with the operating document is the town has, the municipalities have the ability to lend money. But they're not going to be seeding money in the organization. It's not there's no giving of permanent money.
But we are having legal expenses.
I mean, yes, we have some legal expenses associated with Nate. It's going into the B fund. But the way we set up the B fund, legal, because of thoughts we had last fall when we were doing the budget, the B fund is well funded legally, so I don't anticipate having to.
But shouldn't we're keeping track of that because we shouldn't pay more than, if the other municipalities aren't paying anything to the legal drafting.
I mean, we can talk about that. I don't think at the end of the day, it's gonna be such a sizable amount of money that it's necessarily, but we can talk about that.
Isn't Nate the only lawyer working on?
Well, he's been the only one working on the drafting. There's huge value in being the municipality that puts the documents together in the first place. So,
Okay,
anyhow, okay, that's all I had. Anybody? Budget modifications, so the budget modifications. Oh, I'm sorry, we're supposed to do minutes next. We had minutes, from, Chris, can you remind me? I don't actually.
A special meeting, August 9th, regular meeting.
Special meeting, yep, August 2nd and regular meeting. Did anybody have any alterations to those? Just needed for the resolution. Then I would move to approve the minutes as presented for the special meeting on August 2nd and the regular town meeting on August 9th. Second.
Good.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Budget modifications, the budget modifications, refer to, we had, the highway bond permit was not included in the original budget. It's a budget request change. It's a budget, amount modification of only $101. We will be including that in the 2023 budget process, so we don't have to do a modification next year coming out of contingency. That's number one for the A fund. And the second one refers to the purchasing the software for the meter reader that was approved in a previous resolution. So again, this is coming out of money that we had earmarked for a new capital reserve for Water District 3. We're going to take it out of those reserves. So afterwards, we're going to be putting $16,998 at the end of the year. Will be going into capital reserves.
Good question.
Yeah.
When I was looking at the statement that was sent out for the last meeting, I couldn't find the SW3 599.
Okay,
It's not. Just.
I will.
Would see.
I'll ask Michelle about it. I'm sorry, I can't give you an exact answer off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, she can. I'm just curious.
Sure.
It's probably a,
Sub budget or no?
you know,
Is there, so.
yeah, so it's on the balance sheet. It's not
Okay.
it's not in the expense listing. It's a balance sheet account.
Quiz, I always like to look, you have to keep looking at it, otherwise it's like a perishable skill.
okay, well,
So, is there a motion? I think I have a motion.
You can write that down, Stephen.
I'm sorry.
You've got enough. work to do, I'll see that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's very nice. I appreciate that. my help. So I'll move that resolve of the town board approves the 2022 budget modifications as presented. Is there a second? All those, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. And privilege of the floor. That brings us to privilege of the floor. Is there, there's nobody in attendance from the general public, but is there anybody online who wishes to speak to us?
Yeah, yes, this is Bob again. If I could just augment a little bit on what I said earlier. I apologize if what I said earlier was a little abrupt, but let me just give you a little bit of history about the Saganic Farms issue. Route 89 is a state and federal scenic byway. It's subject to its very strong oversight. The town of Ulysses is obligated by law to help maintain that. When they came to us in the BZA and asked for some modifications a few years ago, they came with multiple requests. We actually, I would urge you all to go, if you're interested, go back and look through the public record. Our meetings were recorded. You can look at the minutes, but also hear us out. We had, I believe, 2 public hearings. I believe we had 6 meetings of the BZA where we worked on their requests. Some of those went on till 10 or 11 at night. It was a huge amount of effort on the BZA. And from my remembrance, we actually granted some of what they requested. We turned down other things. They wanted to have 3-foot-high lighted signs across their front wall that they built. We turned that down. They wanted to have an incredible number of signage, which is way over the side. We gave them some signage over the sides, but turned down others. And earlier tonight, you heard from their architect that we turned down a request for their tops on the buildings. That's actually factually incorrect. I went back through my notes on it. What we turned down was the fact that they wanted to build the building within 10 feet of the road. And so that's just factually incorrect. And I think before you get drawn into going to a business district, you should look at some of the history, think about the overall situation. I would ask that you be respectful to those of us who are volunteers in the town who have put time into this in the past. So I'm happy to talk to anyone about it, but I would urge you to look very carefully. And what you heard tonight, I think is factually incorrect from their architect. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the public who wishes to address us? If not,
We adjourn.
Second.
Night, thank you.
good night, everybody.